This is episode number 230 with living master Charles Warren, CW Mundy.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
In a minute, we're going to hear from the great CW Mundy. What an opportunity this is. This is a red letter day, especially for him. No, just kidding. Anyway, coming up after the interview, we're going to have our this week's marketing minute, which is at the end of this. And I'm going to answer questions about marketing. And today we're going to talk about how to know if your artwork is ready for prime time, ready to sell. And also, how do you manipulate or utilize things like competitions to your advantage to help you in your marketing? So we'll talk about that. So stick around when we're done with CW. And I want you to raise your hand if you've been plein air painting this week. And if you haven't, shame on you. Well, I'm one of those people that I barely got out. You know, some of you are in ice and snow and you're getting out, and I'm making excuses, that I have to work. So I got out one time, did a watercolor, but I didn't get a lot of time. It's been an insane week. There's a lot going on. We did a big Black Friday blowout sale and continued through the end of the week. And, it's just been crazy. Of course, we've had the Thanksgiving time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're really happy and honored and quite frankly humbled that we have been named number one painting podcast in the world by FeedSpot. And this is our second year in the row. And there's a lot of really, really good podcasts on their list. And so we're really humbled and thankful that we have been able to accomplish that. Christmas time is around the corner. It's going to be here before we know it. And then it's January. It's going to be here before you know it. As a matter of fact, I think what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about what to be thinking about for next year in the marketing podcast too. So we'll have to make sure to add that. Remind me if I forget. If you're looking for ideas, of course, a lot of us, I know I go out Christmas shopping for somebody else and I'll see something I want and I just kind of get it. But oftentimes, everybody's asking me, well, what's on my list? One of the things that you might want to put on your list is the ultimate plein air event, which is the Plein Air Convention. And that's going to be held in Denver in May. It's going to be an exciting time. We're going to be painting in Estes Park. We're going to be painting in Garden of the Gods and some other incredible spots. Plus, we have some of the greatest masters of all time who are going to be on our stage, including today's guest, CW Mundy, who's going to be receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. And there's some other things that you're going to learn about at some point. We have about 80 instructors. We have 4 to 5 stages. I think it's 4 this year. Maybe it's 5. We have a watercolor stage and we have a pastel and main stage and, a lot of stuff going on. Big expo hall. And this year we have a big celebrity. We're not allowed to announce it yet, but when it gets announced, this is a national celebrity. Someone from the movies, from television. I can't say any more than that, but it's a big deal. And once that word gets out, we're likely to sell out because we were sold out pre-COVID, and then we had to cancel that convention. So when it's going to sell out anyway, but when we announce this, it's going to be a big deal. So go ahead and get signed up at pleinairconvention.com. Also, if you're looking for a really great gift for somebody, I have been a watercolor artist for about a year. I started that, maybe 2 years now. I started it watching watercolor live a couple of years ago, and I did it kind of because we're sponsoring and hosting the event, and I thought, I probably should learn watercolor. And it turns out I've gotten very passionate about it, and I love it. I'm doing oil, I'm doing watercolor, and I'm doing pastel. But one of the things that's really been fun about it is learning. I always thought, watercolor was kind of a certain style or certain approach. And, you can accomplish some very incredible things depending on who's teaching you and what their method is. And so we have 3 days plus an optional beginner's day at Watercolor Live coming up in late January. And we would love for you to attend. And it's also, it's inexpensive. It's a great gift. It's something that somebody and loves or wants to learn watercolor or wants to get to the next level. Just go to watercolorlive.com. And of course, another great gift idea, PleinAir Magazine. We're very proud of it. We've been around for, a long, long time. I think it was about a decade, 2 decades ago now that we launched it. It just seems impossible that much time has passed. And we just have a brand new design. It's still the number one selling art magazine at the newsstands nationally at Barnes and Noble. And quite frankly, it's cheaper to buy your own subscription than to buy it on the newsstand. It's almost twice as much to buy it on the newsstand. So we also, in the digital edition of PleinAir Magazine, we have 30% expanded content that is not in the print magazine. And of course, you can zoom in on those images, and it's really kind of nice. Our guest today is CW Mundy. CW and I have become really, really great friends over the years. I don't even remember where we met. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he is officially Charles Warren Mundy. He is an American Impressionist, born and raised in Indianapolis. We have that in common. I'm from Indiana. He graduated with a fine art degree and a secondary education teaching degree from Ball State University, which is in Muncie, Indiana. And then he worked on a Master of Fine Art at Long Beach State in California. From an early age, CW demonstrated a lot of interest and skill in drawing and athletics. And in 1978, he combined his love for art and sports and worked as a sports illustrator for over a decade. Boy, I'll tell you, the illustrators, they've just got it, man. That's a great place to start. In the early 1990s, he sought a different approach to painting and took on a challenge of painting more in an impressionistic style, going outdoors, doing more plein air, more from life. And his style led him to a series of European plein air painting trips from 1995 to 2009, and plein air trips to the East and West Coast and harbors of the USA, including he has been many times to the Adirondack artist retreat that I do, the Publishers Invitational. And that's where we've really been able to kind of enhance and develop our friendship. And he and Rebecca come up. So it's really nice. CW, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Hey, I'm honored to be here.
We didn't talk about your music too. You're an accomplished musician. So let's just go ahead and talk about that. We'll get that out of the way. When you come up to the Adirondacks, you and Rick Wilson and sometimes Eric Koppel and some other folks, you're jamming almost every night. You're playing the banjo. Did you start out in music playing the banjo?
No, my grandmother bought me the Arthur Godfrey ukulele.
Really?
And that was my introduction, although the real introduction into music into my life was my grandmother on my mother's side, Stella Peak. She played piano for the stand-up movies downtown in Indianapolis, the Circle Theater, and then over in Irvington at that big theater. And she did all the Scott Joplin ragtime music that was popular during the 20s and the teens. And so when I went over to their home, my grandparents' home, I was just amazed to see a human being do that and make music with the right and left hand at the same time. I just couldn't figure out how anybody could figure out how to do that.
And these were for silent movies?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, she played all the backup piano for the silent movie industry.
Oh, well, it just doesn't even seem like it's that close to where we are today. Things have changed so much. So you started out playing the ukulele, and did you get pretty good at it?
Well, I could play chords, and I could sing. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. I could play stuff like that. My dad bought me a 4-string tenor guitar, which was a bigger body, steel strung, and I played that. And then my dad got me into a 12-string acoustic guitar, German 12 strings because of the birds, and hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me,
Yeah.
and so then I got my first Martin guitar, and then my father bought me my first 5-string banjo.
Wow. You were very lucky to get that kind of support. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, amazing though. I wanted to play the piano because my grandmother just blew my mind, but my dad said, "No, no son of mine's going to be playing the piano. He's going to be a jock," which I ended up being. But I to this day, I would much rather than the banjo play the saxophone or the piano. Those are my two favorite instruments. I grew up. My parents used to roller skate and dance at the Riverside Arena to the big band sound, and so I really listened a lot. And my favorite instruments in the big band sound were the horn section, and they go da 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 da, all the horn section and stuff. And so I love that, and to this day, it still has an imprint on me on the jazz stuff that I'm trying to play now.
But you never have been able to take the time to learn either of those instruments.
No, 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 no. I on my second CD, I pecked on the piano. I
Yeah.
I pecked some notes
Yeah.
to give it that flavor that I wanted, but that you can do that in kindergarten too.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty major accomplishment to master one instrument, let alone, ukulele,
I don't
guitar.
think I've
You know,
mastered when you know of the plethora of unbelievable banjo musicians that are out there, the greatest in the world, some of which are my very dear friends. It's very humbling because I don't know anything compared
Well,
to
from my uneducated perspective, you're pretty amazing when you play. So it's pretty interesting to hear you say that. You played professionally, if I remember correctly, weren't you doing some sound recording in LA or something?
well, we had a band called the Tarzan Swing Band,
Yeah.
and the greatest 5-string jazz player ever in the history of music was their young banjo player, and then he left to practice. He didn't want to play anymore, so they grafted me in, and I had to try to play some of his songs that he actually wrote, like the Woody Woodpecker Rag, which I'm relearning right now. Uh, and so I had to play then with them, and we were going to record. MCA was getting ready to. They just hired Elton John, and they were going to bring us in the Tarzan Swing Band. We were going to be the next Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and then our fiddle player Simon, who was from France, was dying of Hodgkin's disease, and she came back after a chemotherapy treatment, and she was fried. She was gone then, and that was the end of that. The music thing, and God spoke to me in my buddy's brand new convertible when I left, really crying from that show we did that night. He said, you're gonna don't be so upset. I'm gonna have you're gonna be doing your artwork, and I mean literally. And I wasn't following the Lord then, but He spoke to me in my heart because I was desperate, because I saw that whole dream leave. And He said, "No, you're going to be an artist. You're not going to have to depend on 4 or 5 other people in your band. You're going to be doing your artwork." And that's exactly what God did.
So I got to ask you about that because that's a very big part of your life, and we've had discussions about that. But you hear people who often say, "I heard God talking to me," and other people hear that and they go, "What? No, what?" And you were not a believer at the time. So what? How did you know it was God talking to you?
Well, uh, upon redemption in Jesus Christ, when you believe on Him for eternal life, then He gives you everything that you need. It says in the Ephesians chapter 1, everything that you need. He has finished, accomplished that on the cross of Calvary. So everything you need is there. So I'll jump from that to point B, and point B is the sheep know the shepherd's voice.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to painting now. So you get this word from God that you're not going to have to worry about five other people and entertain playing your banjo. You now are going to be a painter. Were you already a painter at that time?
Oh, yes, I had done. When I lived out there in Southern California to make money, I did animal portraits, or I'd paint what anybody wanted me to paint. Because I had already had my undergraduate and master's degree, and
So this is when you were an illustrator.
well, this was actually before I became an illustrator. I was just, I knew how to paint. If you're going to get a master's degree, hello, you better know how to paint. So I knew how to paint, but I just did things commercially that would pay my rent so I could be out on the beach playing volleyball and chasing girls.
Yeah. Are you
And
still doing that?
no, I got my girl, boy.
All right. Yeah, she's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, it's the best thing that happened to me since Jesus.
So I'm going to ask you a really silly question, and I'm sure that this is going to be completely um, hard to answer. But you have I've known you for a long time now, but you have really graduated to the highest level of mastery in painting most human beings would ever aspire to. Um, h- how does it feel when somebody refers to you as a master, and do you actually believe that?
Well, uh, I, I, I I would admit that I do have a certain amount of competence, but that's up for people to the as you know in the business, the name master flows around fairly freely,
A little bit too loosely, and I probably am
and
responsible for some
and
of
all
that.
their friends that are on Facebook, they always tell their friends, "You're just such a master," and that's nice, but I'm not. I can really tell you, at just turning 77, I'm not impressed with myself at all. I'm impressed with what God wants to do through me if I just stay out of the way.
How do you know to do that?
Well, it's a real job, the your mind and your emotions and your will, which is your soul, really wants to run the show, and that's the big battle that the Lord has. The pecking order, according to scripture, is the spirit rules the soul and the soul runs the body. But unfortunately, as human beings, we're always going to have this challenge where our mind and our emotions and our will wants to run the show and the spirit gets thrown in the back seat.
Well, do
And
you ever have those moments when you're painting and there are things that are going through your mind that are completely obtuse to the actual process? Things like, oh, boy, they're really going to like this one, or man, this one's just going to win all the awards, or do you ever have those kind of thoughts?
no, uh, I know at the end, if I think that this is, I use these terms. There's times when you get the grand slam, and you're always happy for that. And I think the artist has the ability, if he has a certain level of seasoning, he has the ability to be able to call a grand slam for himself or a home run. There's a big difference between a home run and a grand slam, and then a triple bagger, a double, a single,
Yeah,
a strikeout, and a walk.
yeah, or not showing up at all,
Huh?
or not showing up at all.
Yeah.
I,
So
you
I
know,
really, I'm so engrossed in the whole process of painting. I don't my mind really, and I'm grateful for it. Doesn't wander off like, well, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? I've already figured that out in the morning. When I get up.
ah,
So anyway, no, I don't really. I don't have a wandering mind because there's so much going on in the process. That's the whole thing for me. Painting is the whole journey from the beginning, the conception of what the subject matter is going to be, and all the way through. It's a spiritual and a soulical thing, all mixed in one endeavor.
Well, I got to tell you that I pay very close attention to you on social media, and you were at a level that I didn't think that anybody could exceed. You were so strong, and then you started doing some really weird stuff. You started experimenting, and you were talking about this. You were showing it anyway, and then you did this one painting, and you know the one I'm referring to. It's a painting of a stick, and that stick, it was so three-dimensional, I could have reached out and grabbed it. And yet when you zoom in on it, or if you got close to it, I haven't seen it in person, you just, it's completely abstracted. And I remember sending you a note and saying, I don't know how you did it, but you have topped yourself considerably. I mean, I think it was the beginning of, 20% better than you had been. And now your work is something about that experimentation period. Your work is even stronger. And I didn't think it could get there. What's behind that? How do you get from point A to point B to point C? And how do you keep getting yourself to a higher level of accomplishment?
With the higher level. That's the whole point. I stay the heck out of the way as much as I can, and it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing, and it's all through Scripture what He will do for those who love Him and want to have that intimate relationship with Him. That's what Christianity is. It's a personal relationship. It's not a religion. I hate religiosity. I hate religion. Christ didn't die on the cross to start a religion. He died on the cross so that we could have an intimate relationship with Him, His Father, and the Holy Spirit.
Okay. And I get that. Get out of the way. But did you discover anything in the process beyond that that could be shared in terms of how to grow?
Well, yeah, experimentation is a big part of the whole journey. You're painting a painting. That's an experiment. Hello, is anybody home?
Hello.
So I talk often when I would teach. I would tell the students, look, you got to be willing to go off to the right, way off that direction, and you got to be willing to go way off on the left side. And I'm talking not politically. I'm talking about your right arm and your left arm. You've got to go out on a limb and be willing and know that, hey, if it's too scary out there, you can come halfway back. And if it's still too scary, you can come back another half from that. So, but the ones that bear the most fruit, that get to become better and better artists, are those who are willing to go out and challenge themselves, because you don't know what's out there unless you're willing to gamble and go out there and find it.
You were at the very first Publishers Invitational. What happened is I had been somewhere and some artists started talking about, we never get to paint together, get to hang out together at plein air events because we're busy, we're competing. And so I came up with this idea of the Publishers Invitational. I invited, I think it was 7 artists to meet me, and we took over a bed and breakfast in Austin at Roy Williams' place at the Wizard Academy. And then, some of the artists, yourself included, said, hey, can I invite Carolyn Anderson or, whomever? And we ended up with, I think, 16 of us. Do you remember that?
Well, actually, I didn't get to go to that one, did I?
Yes, you were there. You were
No,
there.
I think we were sick, or what?
No, you were there.
Yeah, we were sick, but I got the whole report. I think we talked about setting that up, and yes, I did get some really quality artists to come there, but I wasn't able
Oh,
to.
you weren't. I was thinking you were because Todd Reifers was there,
Yeah,
and I
Todd.
guess that's why I was thinking you were there.
No.
Well, what I was going to say is that somewhere along the line at one of these events, you did something that was an eye-opening thing for me, and that was the idea of deconstructing.
Oh yeah.
You want to talk about deconstructing?
Well, Whistler says, I build a form and I destroy it. I build a form and destroy it. I build a form and destroy it. And that is like ointment to my spirit. I mean, that's the building and the deconstruction process. You know, you don't ever let anything, so many of the problems that artists face in the beginning, they start laying in the beginning of the painting. They get too in love with some of their earlier marks and registrations. And then, you know, you can't do that. In fact, what I like to do is lay in all the masses and then take my Kleenex and get rid of all the brush strokes on purpose so that the ones that are I'm going to build in my centrality of focus or build my story about, those strokes will really have some meaning. So it's thinking in those primary, secondary, and tertiaries. But the deconstruction part, there's another big key important part in that, because if we were honest with ourselves, we're all control freaks and we'll suck the blood out of anything if we get a chance. So that deconstruction will help you to not get too in love with what's going on and find out that you know, hey, I built it back up. I like it even better now than it was before. And why? Because it's not so controlled. That's
Yeah.
one of the big problems that I see that all beginning artists have. You look at their painting and it might be a plein air piece and it might be real objective and have that impressionist realistic look, but all of the strokes and everything is so controlled. It's almost like, to me, it's just like makes my body tight and uptight.
Well, I was thinking of you. I was painting in New Zealand with a group that I took over there recently, and I was painting this ship in a port, and it was a big ship, and old 1900s
Mhm.
smokestack and everything. And I rendered that thing just perfectly. Every porthole, every wire, everything. Which I don't know why I was even going down that path, but I was for whatever reason.
Your
And I
mind
looked.
sometimes will take you that way.
You what?
Your mind sometimes will take you.
Yeah, I think so. And I looked at that and I thought, this isn't a painting. It's a photograph, and it wasn't a very good photograph. And I just took my palette knife and just started scraping it. And all of a sudden my voice said, "Stop." And it was like perfect. The deconstruction, it still read like the ship. But it had this
But it looks like
vibrance,
art.
had energy. Yeah, it looked like art.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of the deconstruction. You hit the nail on the head. Eric, that's a perfect example. And when you see your painting get in that situation, that's the time to scrape out and scrape back and then come back and lay in some stuff, because it's, you've got to be, I talk to my students about, you got to be the Steven Spielberg. You got to direct your painting. And when you see the painting going in the direction that is not worthy of what you're after, then you've got to deconstruct it and come back and fill in the blanks.
So, you talked about, softening it, deconstructing it and softening and then putting in vital brush strokes. I often wondered if to some extent that's what Sargent did. I look at that and I see those yummy brush strokes and I wonder, did he just save those for the last? And did he, you know,
You hit the nail on the head, Eric. He did exactly what you said. Sargent was so particular about, what his painting was, what he wanted, and with all of his mileage and experience, he'd put those brush strokes down on that chair, put it down, and go, nah, scrape it, put it down again. Nah, scrape it, put it down again. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
So no, that's being really diligent, deliberate, and getting what you really, not settling for second best. That's why he wasn't the second best artist. He was one of the greatest commissioned portrait artists that we know of.
So assuming that, you guys both have landed in heaven, and you get a chance to sit down with him, do you have anything you would ask him?
Yeah, what cigars did he like to smoke? Because I can't smoke anymore because they're too carotid. I don't know what the questions would be now, but I guarantee you uh, there would be a lot of language flowing. I would do a lot of listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think he could learn from you?
I don't think much.
So, since we're talking about Sargent, who are some of the artists who really have inspired you, and what was it about those artists that inspired you?
Well, there's so many for all different reasons because I'm a very eclectic student of the history of art. I love tons of different schools because there's so much meat and so much understanding and so much mileage and so much to look at. I was just looking. Tad Retz and we work on projects together, and I was bringing to his notice the decorative artists of France from 1890 to 1930, Boyard, Bonner. I can't think of the other names right off the bat, but they painted these scenes with a lot of pattern, and pattern was the biggest part of the whole reason the way they were painting. And I find that that's very interesting. And why it's so interesting is Carolyn Anderson talked to me a long time ago about the fact that human beings, their mind loves patterns because it can recognize patterns. And so that's why that decorative art with the pattern stuff was so desirable. Even Danny McCall and Dan McCall will put, and John McCall in his total non-objective paintings will put pattern in there because pattern is something that can be jittery and interesting and draw attention, and it's a neat thing.
And yet pattern can also be completely distracting and not work. I was taught by one of my early mentors about being really careful about if you have patterns, let's say it's a row of trees, that pattern, you got to break it up. You got to make it interesting. You got to space them differently. You don't want everything to be evenly spaced. Is that,
Well,
how you feel?
well, but that's the problem with the human being. The trees aren't in don't need to be spaced perfectly. They're already spaced perfectly for anybody to view.
Right.
But that's just over designing. But ask me your question again because there was something I wanted to say.
Well, I was talking to you about artists who have inspired you.
Oh, well, I love Emil Carlson, Dine Carson, his son. Of course, Monet, Degas, Whistler, way back. Who's the artist that brings the figures out of darkness? Yeah, Caravaggio.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Rembrandt, Michelangelo, Titian, Rousseau. Modern, one of my favorites is this Ukraine guy that we have become really, really wonderful friends. Have a wonderful friendship now because I fell in love with his art, and his name is Denis Gorodnichi. And Dennis's work is he's one of the most spectacular plein air painters I think out there, and he he's really kind of like Levitan on steroids. A whole new generation of that great Russian heritage. He's phenomenal, and what a humble, beautiful human being he is. He's only, how old is he, Rebecca?
35 or 40.
Maybe 35 or 40. Really young guy, but boy, his work is absolutely spectacular. I think he's a guy that you need to send a film crew there, and you need to go yourself.
All right.
Like,
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go to the Ukraine right now, but I'll meet him somewhere else.
well, yeah, but
I'll fly him over here.
yeah. He's absolutely, the audience would go nuts over him.
Well, speaking of which, we just sent a film crew up to Indianapolis to spend a week with you. And that's something I think you and I have chatted about for 15 years, about, beating you over the head about the idea of finally documenting what you've learned. And one of the things you kept saying is, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And so that's something that is going to be kind of fun that's coming up. We
Yeah,
won't talk much about it, but
yeah, these new 4 videos are going to have, I think, real cutting edge. We're not going to let the cat out of the bag, but real things that I'm very interested in, that I really got schooled in the educational department by trying these different styles of painting. I've got a new one now that I'm hot on the trail. You want to know what it is?
yeah.
Well, I'm incorporating Impressionism with pop art.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I know exactly what you're talking about because you sent me
Yeah,
an idea. I won't talk about what it was, but I
yeah.
and I think if I can say so much, as you were questioning whether or not you should send it to a certain event, and I thought, yeah, everybody's going to go nuts over it.
Well, I did make the statement, and it could be good or bad, that one thing that I do know for sure, it will be probably one of the most talked about paintings in the exhibition, and that could be bad and good. But I'm not concerned about the bad. I'm not concerned about the good. I'm concerned about what I want, what I feel the Lord leading me to paint. And as you know, Eric, everything's fair game as long as it's moral. I'm in there, baby.
Well, so what I think is interesting about this is you didn't, I don't think, I mean, I think you would tell me if this were the case. You didn't start out by saying, I think I'm going to create something controversial for this event. It
No,
was just like, I think this would be a cool thing to send to this event. What do you think? And so there's nothing manipulative about it.
yeah, and also too, Eric, I've done several toy paintings that my wife said, "You're not going to paint that from photography. You're going to have to hand draw it and paint it." So I did. I did probably 15 or 20, and they were very successful in the market. One of them that I want to mention that I think was really cool, because I'd always come up with cool titles, and this one was a Japanese toy tin city garbage truck that I painted, that was white, and I painted that, and then I had a cootie from the cootie game that I disassembled, and I had its body and its head departed, and its legs laying there, the little black legs, and the title of it was Roadkill. And that's just the way my childhood mind thinks. I'm playing. It's like when I paint those paintings, it's like when you were a little boy, you went to your closet, because your parents always you got to put your toys in a box and just don't have them laying out everywhere all over the place. And I'd go on it and go to my toy box and say, pull this out, maybe some soldiers, little plastic soldiers, and and then you put a narrative up and you play.
So when did the whole plein air thing start for you? You had gone to school, you learned how to paint. Uh, when did you start going outside?
Well, I had taken to Dan Gerhardt's was the first one that got me back centered on. Look, man, you got to start painting from life, because back when I was just finishing out of my illustration career and I wanted to get in into fine art, I took Dan Gerhardt's workshop because I saw in his work from painting from life that this guy could do stuff that I can't do, and that's what I want to do. I want to do the real. I want to be the real McCoy. So I knew I was going to have to get back and start drawing everything from life and painting from life, and that was back in 1994. In fact, I did my first plein air piece in Switzerland, and it was very tonal, but it was the side of a mountain, a little bit of snow and some shadow and a couple of rocks in the foreground. And then I did another one at Lake Oceanense, and the waiter came up to me when I was finishing. We had gotten some lunch and stuff, and the waiter said, the owner walked out and saw you painting that painting, and he said he would be glad to take the erase your bill if you'd be willing to give him that painting. And I said, well, thanks, I'm very honored, but I want to take that home, because this was like the second painting I've ever painted out on location.
You still have it?
Yeah, oh yeah, we have it in our bedroom.
Yeah. That's what I love about plein air painting, among many things, is I very rarely want to let go of my studies or my outdoor paintings. I will take them and create a different version of them from the original, but I want to keep them because to me they're, it's my life. It's better than a photo album because every single one of them, I look at it and I can remember where I was or who I was with, or, the snow or the rain or the, whatever, the deer jumping in front. And so I think those are very special.
Well, the same with Clyde Aspenbig and Scott Christensen. I've been after Scott for years. They go, oh, yeah, I'll pull one of them out, CW, and let you buy it. He finally had that little small show, but I didn't get to see the paintings that were in there. But I've always wanted one of his. Those guys called them studies. I called them finished paintings. It's just everybody has a different definition for everything these days. But for me, it was more than a study. It was a complete painting. And the reason I call it a complete painting, because it was so simplified and edited, because as yourself, when you're getting out there, you've only got so much light, a control light, same light to paint the subject. And these guys would do these all 8x10s.
Yeah.
And they would just get the bare necessities down. But guess what? That's what great painting is.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you in my own path, I remember one time we were camping with the kids across from the ocean, and we were in a little campground, and you could tell sun was going to go down. It was a super windy day. And I said to my wife, can I just slip out? The sun's going to be down in 25 minutes. So I ran across the street, set up the easel, and the wind was blowing and everything was shaking. And I had to hold on to the easel, and the sun was going down fast, and it was a lighthouse painting, and I had no time. And I didn't think, I just was instinctual. And it turned out to be one of the best paintings I ever did. And the same thing happened to me
that's the way it works.
Up in Maine, when I went up for Fall Color Week. There's this place called the Raven's Nest, which is a stunning view. And I took a 30x40. I was going to paint it in plein air. I was going to give myself like 4 or 5 hours to paint it and then wait for the sun. And one thing led to another, and we only had an hour and a half. I got up there, the wind's blowing 65 miles an hour. I'm holding on to it. I'm using the biggest brush I've got, and knocked that giant painting out in less than an hour and 45 minutes. And it turned out to be the best thing I've ever done. And again, it's because I'm not sitting there noodling and thinking about it. I'm just responding to
There you go.
instinct.
That's what is an important aspect of plein air painting, responding to instinct. I want to tell the viewers and you a little story because it's a plein air story. We were in France and we were at Etretat, and we had our gallery manager traveling with us at the time. Well, guess what? That's the image right there. Oh, yeah. So anyway.
And what CW is referring to is we have a video version of the podcast you can find on YouTube. So
yeah. So anyway, we show up at the spot. It's 45 degrees out there, colder than a mackerel. And guess what? The wind's blowing 35 mile an hour. And I said, I'm going to have to hold on to this stupid, canvas and the easel and all that stuff. And I go, it ain't going to happen. Or I said, they've got that restaurant. Let's just go in and get some hot chocolate. So we go into the restaurant, and there's this big picture window with the tables and stuff. And so the owner was there, and I said, well, do you care if I set up? And he said, no, go ahead. He said, I'd be honored. I think that's great. So I painted Etretat, the needle, right there, and there had hot chocolate. You can see the hot chocolate and the thing, and we had some food, and I painted that, and to this day we have that painting at home. We didn't put it out on the market. We've sold different ones that I've painted because we painted in France several different times. But so that was really an interesting thing that happened. You never know what's going to happen when you're plein air painting. The other thing in Europe that I always like to talk about, in the beginning, I hated hearing all the motorcycles, because, you find a spot that you got to paint, you may have to be right there on the street, which a lot of times it was to get the view that you want. You're right on the edge of the street. And I used to get so annoyed. I go, oh no. And Rebecca was trying to shoot video and stuff. And I got so annoyed, but then it ended up after being there a month and a half, I looked forward to hearing the motorcycle. I loved them. Then you'd hear the police and the ambulance was going by. And I loved all the sounds.
I remember you referring to the reason you ended up taking that trip to France. Do you remember that?
Yeah, because my wife said, CW, we're going to the Chicago Art Institute, and we're going to see that Monet exhibition. He's got 242 paintings, the largest collection of his work to this date, and that was 1995. And I go, Rebecca, please. I said, I don't want to go. I said, I've studied him. I know all about him. I don't really care about going. And then I started thinking, how selfish of me to rob her of that chance when she was excited to see it. So I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to take her. And I said, honey, I'm sorry. I've asked her to forgive me. Let's go up there. You set it up. We'll go up and we do it. I came out of that show like a rocket. It was such an encouragement to me because we were getting ready to go to France to follow Monet's footsteps and I'll paint all the places that he had painted. And when I saw that exhibition, I said, even though I didn't have hardly any experience in plein air painting, I told Rebecca, I can do this. I think I can do this. And that's exactly, it was really God motivating me too and letting me know that, you're not going to fall on your face. This is going to be something. And it was.
So thank you to CW Mundy. In case you're wondering, we didn't finish. We didn't say goodbye because we're going to have to put this into part 2, which you'll be able to hear next week. All right, let's get right into the Marketing Minute.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
Oh, in the Marketing Minute, I was sleeping there. In the Marketing Minute, I answer your art marketing questions. You can upload your video questions at artmarketing.com/questions, or you can email me, eric@artmarketing.com. Amadine, our producer, what is the first question?
The first question is from Jen Wendling from Syracuse, New York. I am a new artist. I'm just starting to put my work out there. I've sold some pieces. What is your recommendation for new artists? And do you have any advice on how I should manage my reputation online and in person?
That's a really great question. It's very astute of you to ask that question because if you're just kind of starting and nobody really knows who you are, I mean, some people do, obviously. There's an old quote, right? The old quote is, you never have a second chance to make a first impression. And so many artists start out and hurt their careers by making really silly mistakes, reputation mistakes, marketing mistakes. And I'm not just trying to hawk my book, but you need to read my book, Make More Money Selling Your Art. That's a really good place to start. But let's just talk about that in case you don't read it. By the way, I've got a great blog at artmarketing.com too. So what I would recommend, you're brand new. You first off want to say, okay, what do I want out of my career? What is my grand vision? Now, I don't know what age you are, Jen, but I'm going to pretend you're 25. Okay. And I'm going to pretend you have a 50-year career ahead of you. And if you plant the right seeds now and continue working the system, you're going to be able to be, by the time you're relatively, not terribly old, if you do it right, let's say 5 or 7 years from now, you could be considered a very important artist. And 10, 15 years from now, you could be considered a master artist and then ride that wave for the rest of your career. Now, you got to have the chops. I'm not going to talk about the chops. You're going to have to figure out how to get the chops, how to be a good painter, et cetera. That's a whole nother animal. And I know CW is going to have talked about that a little bit. So I think the first thing to understand is, well, what are my goals? What is my 5-year, 3-year, 2-year, 1-year goal? What do I need to do? And I would start out in spite of the fact you want to do some big dreaming and where do you ultimately want to be, all of that stuff, setting those goals is important. I think what you want to do is start out by saying, okay, how do I get what I need in year one? Now, if you're working another job, what I highly recommend is not quitting your job. What I highly recommend is paint and figure out a way to get to the same level of income that you're at in your job. And once you get to the same level of income, prove it for another year. And once you've proven it for another year, then you can quit your job or you can phase out of your job because you get this overlap. And that's a really great way to do it because it takes some of the risk out of it. And that can be nerve wracking because you quit your job, you don't have any income, you're under a lot of stress unless you've got savings. A lot of us don't. So I think that's one of the things you want to do. And I have a whole video series just about that one particular topic somewhere. I don't know where it is, but we can find it. Anyway, the idea here is you got to, everything you do isn't going to go perfect. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and mistakes are important because you grow from mistakes. And it's better to make mistakes when you still have an income, because once you're relying on your income, if you make those mistakes, you're going to be harder, more costly. So I would recommend that procedure. But where you're going to start is you got to start building a collector base, people who are interested in your work. You got to start building a database of people who have expressed interest in your work and a database of people who have expressed interest in your workshop. You got to build the right kind of website. And most people do websites wrong. There's a whole chapter on that. And you need to look for ways that you can get frequently in front of people in a tasteful way so that they're going to see your artwork. And a lot of people do that with newsletters. And I have a whole section on newsletters because most people do newsletters completely wrong. And, they make it all about them and nobody cares about you. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend you, but they don't even know you yet. Why would they want to read your newsletter? Unless you do something in your newsletter that is really interesting to them. So look for something they care about, make it about them, and then pepper it with the stuff about you, and it's gonna go much better. The idea is you wanna build your own media, and when you build your own media, that means you get them on your list, and that way you can talk to them through email, etc. Now, there's the whole social media marketing thing, uh, and that's very important, more important than ever, but it's not everything. And if you are of the generation that has grown up with only social media, you're going to assume that nothing else exists. And I have a mentor that I actually have paid a lot of money to teach me a lot about marketing. And one of the things he says is if you're only digital, you only have half of a business. And what he means by that is there are other ways to generate income. A gallery is not digital. You might be advertising a gallery on Instagram or Facebook, or they might be advertising you, but that's not where you reach everybody. There's certain people who have money who are not looking at your Instagram or your Facebook, and you'll never figure out how to reach them all. And so what you want to do is ask yourself, where is the money? How can I stand in the river where the money is flowing? So what are the rivers where money is flowing? Well, art shows is a river where money is flowing. You've got uh, tent shows, in your local community. If you're up for it, if you're good enough, you have these art shows like the LA Art Show, Palm Beach Art Show, Baltimore, those kinds of things, where you can buy a booth. They're expensive, but they're probably worth it. Um, you have art magazines like My Fine Art Connoisseur. I got all these billionaires who read it and buy art. I One advertiser tells me he gets $80,000 average sales from each ad, but that's a cumulative effort. And also he sells, $500,000 paintings. So you got to try a lot of different things, and you got to stick with it because you're in it for the game, the long haul. And what typically happens when people are first learning marketing, they like, oh, I tried that, didn't work, I'll go somewhere else. And then, oh, I tried that, it didn't work, I'll go somewhere else. And you keep doing that, and you just burn out everything. When if you stick with something and you just keep building on it, you build momentum over a long period of time. So that's kind of a first piece of that. The second thing is about reputation. Now, reputation matters more than you can possibly imagine. If you make the wrong moves early, you are getting yourself in trouble. Okay, so let's just assume that you get invited into this gallery and you haven't done your homework, and it turns out the gallery has a bad reputation and they're taking advantage of people, and they're not paying their bills, and they're not paying their artists, and everything is going wrong with them. You get tainted by their reputation. On the other hand, if you got invited into like one of the top galleries, a super important, high reputation, they know that they only select the best, that's a booster to your reputation. And there's a middle ground. You're going to have to go into that middle ground before you go into the high ground, typically, not always. But you want to ask yourself, can I be patient? Can I take my time to get invited into the right places? I have whole chapters and videos on getting invited into art galleries, and getting invited is the answer. You don't want to call on them. Sorry, don't do it. There's a whole reason. And that basically is you're going to annoy them, and they don't want to be annoyed. So get yourself thinking about your reputation. What does my brand look like? Am I elegant? Am I cheap? Am I colorful? What is the brand? What do you want to stand for? Watch branding. Don't copy branding, because people come up with branding concepts and strategies because they have a specific thing in mind that may not be what you think it is. But try to figure out, who has been buying my paintings? What can I understand about them? What do they like about them? What is the story behind them? Write stories for every painting. I I think this is really critically important. Stories stick, and 50% of the people who look at your paintings in a gallery environment are not the kind of people who can get it. You know, 50% are like, "Oh, I get it," and 50% need to be told how to get it. Seems crazy. That's just human nature, right? You get it. I get it, but somebody who's of a particular type of person, they're not going to get it. So think in terms of that and then start building. I think, I like the idea of dominating a particular magazine, dominate it for 5 or 10 years. I have one artist who was broke, bankrupt, hardly had any money, uh, and decided to advertise in one of my magazines. I think it was Fine Art Connoisseur, and just bought what she could buy, which was a quarter page or a half page or something in every single issue, never skipping it. And it was hard. And I said, look, after the first year, you're going to feel a little nervous about this because you're spending this money and you're not really feeling the result, but you got to build your brand and your reputation. And after that, all of a sudden, invites started coming in to be judges and to do galleries and to do shows and stuff like that, and things started selling and moving, and then better galleries came on board after a few years, and she was able to get rid of the crummy galleries, and it just was like elevating up, and has stuck with it for 10 years, and it has put this person into superstar status. Now, you got to be able to paint or draw or sculpt or whatever it is you do, photography. So keep that in mind, but it's a long game and you got to play the long game if you want to succeed. Well, also, I should mention that, there is no difference between your personal reputation and your business reputation. I had a gallery owner, I've told this story a few times, gallery owner in a major, big city, big gallery, important gallery, fired an artist because the artist kept posting pictures of the crazy stuff that he was involved with in partying and stuff like that. And now you could probably tell yourself a story, well, that's the reputation I want, but the gallery got complaints about it. One lady wanted to it turned her off so much she wanted to get a refund on her painting because she didn't like what the artist was standing for. So you got to keep that stuff in mind. I had another artist friend who is very prominent, and he insists on sharing his political opinions on social media. And no matter what you think, and no matter how much you want to stand for what you stand for, which is fine, but just know if you do that, you're going to make 50% of the people hate you. Sorry, it's the truth. They're not going to be able to overcome that. And, you've seen this. I mean, you've seen people who have boycotted companies because they got political, and they just, these companies shouldn't be getting political. I don't want to get political. Anyway, that's about online reputation. Next one, Abedin.
The second question is from Desiree Holmes Sherini from Washington. My art galleries all closed during COVID. I'm not interested in gallery hunting or hanging in short shows anymore. How do I sell and unload artwork currently in storage?
All right. Well, so I'm going to get a little down on you here, Desiree. No offense intended, but it sounds like you've given up. Look, in the world of business, and if you're selling paintings, you're in the world of business. You're a small business, whether you like it or not. And in the world of business, you're going to get your gut kicked in. You're going to get your teeth kicked in. You're going to lose paintings. I had 12 pieces in a gallery out west. The gallery went bankrupt. I never got my paintings back. Luckily, by some stroke of luck, I was at a party. I met a guy. I talked to him. He says, "Oh, we've been looking for you. My sister owned this gallery, and we gave up looking for you, but we have all your stuff." And they sent back in 10 years, 12 years later. Miracle. But for years, I thought I'd been burned. You're going to get burned. It's part of doing business. You don't like it. I don't like it, but it's part of doing business. And if you give up and say, well, I'm not going to go into any galleries because all my galleries closed during COVID, guess what? Not all the galleries did close. There are great galleries out there that are thriving, not just surviving. And there's a lot of other things that you should be doing. So if you're giving up on galleries, if you're giving up on shows, don't give up. Now, if you decide you want to give up because you just don't want to put up with it anymore, I get it. That's fine. You might be at a stage in your life where you just don't want to do that kind of work. But the reality is, if you're going to sell artwork, you got to do the work. And it's a pretty much full-time job. I always say, if you're marketing your own art, you got to spend 20% of your time, which is roughly, 2 hours a day or 1 day a week out of your 5-day week, to work on marketing your art. It's just, you got to work it. You got to be talking to people. You got to be selling. You got to be marketing, putting shows together, all this stuff. I mean, it's just all part of it. If you don't do it, you're not going to get the results you want. The more you're willing to put into it. And in the early stages of your career, you put all that time and effort into it, and then you don't have to do as much. You still got to do it, but you can't completely disappear. But if you keep it alive, keep the train running, you're going to have a big impact. But how do you sell? And in this case, she says, unload artwork currently in storage. Well, okay, so if you want to just unload everything, let's say you're not going to paint anymore, you're not going to try to market your art anymore, you just want to unload everything. Well, there's a lot of things. You can do a garage sale. I know it sounds silly. You can do an art sale like a garage sale. You can do a Facebook Marketplace. If you want, you can place some ads or local ads, depending on the prices and how many paintings. You can place some local ads, in the local media, the newspaper, websites, whatever. If you have something here in Austin, we have the East Austin studio tours. You can participate in that, get space in one of those studios with somebody else, pay them for a little of their time or whatever, put your work in there, and they get big crowds through. You can sell that way. You can try to sell it online and, put together a website with all the stuff that you're offering. If you're trying to get rid of it, then it's all about price, right? Because if you're willing to dip price, you're going to get rid of things much faster. If you're not willing, then it's going to take longer. You can still do it, but it's going to take longer. I think that the real question is, how do I sell artwork if I don't want to do shows and be in a gallery? And that becomes pretty much a self-marketing strategy. That means you're promoting online, you're promoting on social media, you have a very specific strategy for social media, and you also are promoting in other places because, as I've said before, stand in the river where the money is flowing, right? So get into art shows, but you don't want to do art shows. I get that. But where can you stand where the money is flowing? Well, I've got art magazines that have rich, wealthy collectors who love art. And so that's a concentrated audience of people who are going to buy paintings, proven to buy paintings. So, you got to get known there, build your brand, that kind of a thing. And those things matter over time. Now, if you are Desiree, you're kind of like done with this, you're at the end of your career, you just don't want the paintings around anymore, you're not going to paint anymore. I'd probably just go to somebody locally who's already set up. Maybe it's an art gallery, and just say, listen, get rid of these. I need a minimum of, X number of dollars for each of these, or, I'll sell you the whole bunch for X number of dollars, and let it become their problem. And they might have a big sale, or, maybe you can get somebody, if you have a list and you have people who have collected your art in the past, do a studio sale. I'm retiring and I'm getting rid of everything, and this is your big opportunity. And by the way, these paintings are going to be more valuable than ever because I'm not going to paint anymore. Right. So, and you need a story. Everybody needs a story. Now, my rule is the story has to be true. You can't lie, but you need a story. I've decided to stop painting. I made a great career and I had a lot of fun, but I've decided to focus on travel. So I'm going to sell out all my inventory. Or, maybe you have a health issue and you can say, I've developed a health issue and my hands aren't going to be steady for much longer. You can come up with some story, but it's got to be a true story. You can expand on it, you can enhance it, but don't lie. Don't lie. That's important. Okay, that is today's Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Remind you, Christmas, PleinAir convention's coming up. We'd love to have you come, or it'd be a great gift for yourself, or have somebody, get it for you, a spouse or friend or mate or partner or something. Watercolor Live is coming up in January. You do not want to miss this. It's going to be spectacular. That's at watercolorlive.com. And subscribe to pleinairmagazine.com. You can do gift subscriptions. And like when it shows up, my grandmother used to buy me Boy's Life. And Boy's Life showed up every month in my mailbox from the time I was 11 years old till probably I was 15 or 17. I mean, even after I was out of Boy Scouts. And every time that came, it's like, wow, Mima really loves me, right? And so, if you have somebody you want to help culturize, is that a word? Culturize? You want to give culture to, that you think if they, they flip through it once in a while, if you had an art magazine show up, your daughter, your granddaughter, whatever. And, I would do it with my kids. It shows up every other month, and, or if you get PleinAir magazine and Fine Art Connoisseur, those kinds of things. And they're going to always remember you every time it comes. And of course you can get a gift card and all that stuff. Anyway, subscribe to PleinAir magazine at pleinairmagazine.com. And if you've not seen my blog, Sunday Coffee, check it out at coffeewitheric.com. And every day, every weekday, 5 days a week, 12 noon, I'm on YouTube and Facebook Live with Art School Live, where I have lots of different artists interacting, teaching, lots of different things going on. And you'll love it. Go to YouTube and subscribe. Just go to YouTube, search Art School Live. That's easy. And if you don't mind, I'd love a follow. And I'd love for you to kind of private message me, say hello. I love to meet new people all the time. I'd love to meet you. Don't spam me. Don't send me topless pictures and all that nonsense. Yeah, I know it's happened. That's just weird. We don't need that. Anyway, that's it. That's the PleinAir Podcast. Remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.